joining us for the 4 o'clock News and Politics show this Wednesday. I'd like to welcome in Representative Gregg Amore from East Providence into the studio.
Thank you, Kate.
Thanks for taking the time to join us this vacation week.
My pleasure.
Although we know it's not a vacation for most educators who are busy with the task at hand, but wanted to bring you in because you're going to be introducing legislation to address school safety measures. And when you're back in session, we'll see more about this, but really wanted to talk with viewers here a little bit more about this. So tell us a little bit about why you came up with what you did. And I know there's sort of two separate angles to it. So let's talk about the school resource officer angle.
Sure. So when I was a freshman legislator, I signed on to Representative Kazarian's bill that would have enhanced school social workers and school psychologists. That did not move anywhere based on funding concerns. Since then, we have had school shooting after school shooting after school shooting. And, you know, every American can walk into an airport and see that there's a complete change in how we secure airports after 9/11. But the same can't be said for our schools. And so the two pieces of legislation that will be introduced next week, one deals with enhancing the school resource officer program that already exists in Rhode Island, and the other deals with some school construction that would enhance, you know, technology and other school security means as far as you know, engineering and design.
So the first one, addressing school resource officers, is that you want more per number of students.
Right. So most high schools in Rhode Island have a school resource officer embedded right now. Most. Many middle schools have a school resource officer embedded. Elementary schools, by and large, in Rhode Island do not. My proposal would put a school resource officer in every single school, and maybe two in schools that have large footprints and large student population.
And you know, you talk about the budgetary constraints that this that this puts forth. You know, I'm sure you've talked with parents and teachers. I mean, is there just a sense that a conversation needs to happen as to how to make this money available? Because I can't imagine too many people disagree with you.
No, you know, by and large, it's a positive response. But what we do see is that there are always concerns that the municipality will pick up the tab. Is the state going to pick up the tab? We know we have a budget shortfall in the state always. Is there a federal role here? And I've spoken to Congressman Cicilline on this subject. I think there is a federal role here. We have Homeland Security dollars that are targeted to preventing terrorism. This is terrorism, and this is Homeland Security. And so I think, and if you remember, in 2013, the Obama administration put forth a huge federal grant for resource officers.
Okay.
And many municipalities took advantage of that, many states. But then after the grant runs out, how do you finance it? We have to find a way. We have to prioritize.
And so you talked as well about putting them in elementary schools, and you've, I'm sure, had conversations with folks. It's sort of they're at the middle and high school levels now, especially because they deal with discipline issues, not just the most dire situations, but just what we've seen with all age groups. I mean, it might not be addressing the discipline issue with small children, but from simply the safety aspect.
Sure. I think a good resource officer model actually doesn't deal with day-to-day discipline. It doesn't deal with classroom discipline. It doesn't deal with somebody violating the dress code. They deal with safety concerns, the school atmosphere, and then they serve as a confidant for the students who can go to them with anything because they've built relationships and say, hey, I've heard this or I've seen that. Can you act upon this? Can you inquire about this? So I think if you put them in elementary schools, yes, they're a line of defense. And I would suggest that if Newtown had a school resource officer and the vehicle was parked out front, the cruiser, and there was some sort of resistance, I think things may have been different. There is a deterrent factor. That's not the primary role of a school resource officer, but there is a deterrent factor, and there is a person with a weapon in the building.
And what have your conversations been with colleagues around this?
Most of my colleagues are very supportive. I mean, there are questions about funding. There are people who are concerned about the militarization of schools. There are people who are concerned about the SRO model. My experience in 29 years in a public school classroom is that the SRO model works. In fact, I wish we had another one at East Providence High School. I wish we had more in East Providence. I think they just enhance the school community. Look, there's challenges surrounding this bill that we're going to have to sift through and figure out, you know, where the finance will come from. How do we train this number of people, and what kind of capacity we have?
Okay, so that's one piece of the legislation. There's a whole other separate piece of legislation addressing how to provide reimbursements to schools who are looking to address just safety measures locked doors, bulletproof materials. I mean, what types of things do you envision that schools will look at if this type of money is available to them?
Right, and so just some background. We have a proposal from the governor, $250 million in bond money that would go towards school construction and refurbishment. So if a school district wanted to enhance their security in any way, some of the things you mentioned, maybe some door alarms, perhaps bulletproof glass, as you mentioned, then we could do that and get reimbursement from the state based on the same formulas that are embedded into the governor's proposal and that exist already with the RIDE housing. There's so much technology out there to enhance school security. There's an entire industry, crime prevention through engineering, that we can listen. We secure nuclear facilities, we secure government buildings, we secure banks, we secure the State House, but we haven't had that kind of intensity around schools.
And what do you hear from, especially teachers and educators? You know, I'm sure you hear from students who are fearful of the worst case scenario, but what do you hear teachers say, I wish we had this?
Yeah, most of the teachers that I work with and that I talk to think this is a pretty good idea. It gives them peace of mind. They have great relationships with the school resource officers, and they think it's proactive. A lot of times we are reactive, and this is a reactive. It's not a new idea, but it's a reactive idea for us. But school resource officers are really proactive within the community, so they can kind of cut something off before it happens. So teachers know that. I think the general public hears armed guards in schools and gets a little queasy, and I do too. No one could have a worse rating from the NRA than I do. I mean, my name's been on every gun control proposal in the General Assembly. I was one of the key sponsors of the domestic violence proposal last year. But this is something different. This is a practical application of security principles that can protect our children.
And in addition to the SROs, you know, what do educators really want within the schools? Locked doors. I mean, what are those? I'm gonna move you a little closer here.
Sure.
Locked doors, the bulletproof glass. I mean, and the thing is too. I mean, you talk about schools having that reimbursement capacity. You know, are we gonna see some schools, quote unquote, better prepared than others? Is it just the reality of the world in which we live?
It's been the reality in Rhode Island school construction forever, right? The zip code, unfortunately, has determined the quality of the building. I think the citizens of a municipality, of a town, should be demanding this. And if you're going to refit your building, then you should be looking into the best ways to secure that building. And listen, we have a lot of school buildings that are already doing that. But if we're going to reimburse for STEM education or STEAM education, if we're going to reimburse for career and tech, if we're going to reimburse for green building, then we should reimburse for school safety as well.
Well, I appreciate your coming in to talk about this again, the school vacation week, not so much of a vacation heading back, but you're heading back up to the assembly next week. I'll be up there on Thursday doing live from the State House each and every week. What else is on your plate that you'd like folks to know about that's on your agenda for 18 while you're here in the studio?
My biggest agenda item is connected to this. It's the school construction policy. We're hoping to build a new school in East Providence, and I've toured so many schools in Rhode Island that are in shambles. And we have waited too long with the moratorium and then the lack of funding. That's my number one priority, is to get this thing moving, get this money into circulation, and have these districts enhance their schools. Massachusetts is a decade ahead of us, and learning and the environment are connected. And so we have to do this.
One of the things that we're not hearing too much about right now is after it passed out of the Senate, kind of in a holding pattern in the House, the PAWSOX. Did you think you were going to come in and not get asked?
No, you know, I'm a proponent of the new proposal. Now my district borders on Pawtucket. I have many people in my district that go to those games. I think they're a part of the fabric of Rhode Island society. I don't see how this can be a financial loser. The Pawtucket Red Sox are not going anywhere. The Boston Red Sox, their parent club, need them close to them. This looks like it's revenue neutral at worst, and could possibly be better than that. I think the proposal the Senate has put forward is a good one. I'm in favor of it. I may not be a majority in my chamber, but I am in favor of it.
So what do we expect to happen? Do you think that there'll be movement on this in the coming weeks?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know the speaker, and I agree with the speaker. I think he's looking for some more commitment from the team to back up some of this money, to take a little more of the risk on. I don't disagree with that. And I think if that happens, if we see movement toward those type of proposals, I think it may have a chance to move.
Would they have to go through the process again? You know, we had so many hearings in the fall about this. If there's a separate legislative proposal, are we going to have to go through again that public hearing?
I don't think you'll have to go through the public hearing, other than the public hearing that exists within the hearing committees at the State House. because I think most of this has been flushed out. There's not very much new information. We know what Speaker Mattiello would like to see. We know what many of my colleagues would like to see. I think the public is pretty much decided on this.
Do you think the public's decided? We've been in the polls and there's
Well,
been some high disapproval
I
numbers.
think the public's decided on the Paw Sox, wanting the Paw Sox to stay. I don't know if they know what the details are. I mean, if you just throw a question out there that says, do you want them to pay, do you want taxpayer dollars to go toward this? I think the knee-jerk reaction is no. We have to look at stadium projects individually, not holistically. I mean, this is not a major league stadium project. We can't expect the Crafts to come in and purchase the entire thing. That's not the model. It doesn't exist. What does exist?
The Crafts look to do a soccer stadium up in Boston with all their funding.
Yeah, they can do that. I mean, they're a major league situation. You know, they're going to get that funding back. And MLS is different than minor league baseball.
And final question while I have you in here, again, not your chamber, but we're seeing today that the Senate put forth a proposal to expel Senator Nick Kettle for what the charges that we found out this week were. I mean, this is unprecedented to expel a member of a legislative body. What has your discussions been with colleagues surrounding this? Again, I know not your jurisdiction.
Yeah, I really haven't had discussions with colleagues regarding this. You know, I spent a long time teaching government and politics, and so I'm a due process guy. I also understand that the Senate has rules. Now, my personal opinion is that when you become a distraction to the body and when you can't really represent your constituency, it's probably best to step aside. You know, I'm a due process guy, so I don't like to see when we don't have due process in place, but I certainly understand the Senate has rules and they have to function.
It was interesting, we had House Minority Leader Patricia Morgan in yesterday, and we had mentioned that the ACLU had come out with their concerns about that. I think her joke was maybe one of the first times that she'd agreed with Rhode Island ACLU on an issue about the due process side of things. But that hearing is on Tuesday. You can read about that on GoLocal right now. So I appreciate your taking the time to come in. When do we expect the actual introduction of these bills to happen?
Both bills will be introduced on Thursday, and then they'll be scheduled for hearing, and we'll be able to hash this out some more.
Okay, very good. Representative Amore, I appreciate your taking the time to come
Thank you,
all the way into Providence.
Appreciate it.
Okay, we'll talk soon.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I'll let you around the corner. Representative Gregg Amore just announced that he's got 2 pieces of legislation to address school safety measures, including more school resource officers, including elementary schools, acknowledges the budgetary issues surrounding this, and then also about the reimbursement for school safety measures included in the school rehabilitation money that the governor has proposed. We'll be right back with our next guest here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Don't go anywhere.